G'day mate, 40 here. So the Health and Human Services Secretary Bobby Kennedy is describing Adderall and other ADHD drugs as a threat and ordering a review of the use of Adderall by our children. And ADHD is the single most top studied topic in psychiatry, and it is the problem with the quickest solution that has been backed up by mountains and mountains of evidence. If you have ADHD, right, you are not going to recover from it without medication. And we have medication and it works right away. Stimulants work right away. Other ADHD meds take weeks, but they can also be effective. And so Bobby Kennedy here is investigating, right, the one area of psychiatry that has been investigated more than any other, where the evidence is overwhelming that ADHD on average shortens people's lives by a decade. Right? It's not something you want to leave undiagnosed and unmedicated. Right? 90% of my self-destructive antisocial impulses simply went away upon taking my ADHD medication. Right? For pretty much every sex addict, porn addict that I've known, almost every underowner and debtor I've known has had ADHD, and they're unable to get significant progress on their addictions. They're not able to move very far along the path of recovery until they get diagnosed and medicated for ADHD. Right? It's such a simple thing to treat. The benefits of medication are immediate. We should thank God that millions of our children with ADHD are getting properly medicated, and millions of adults with ADHD are getting properly medicated. And even I was 57 before I finally got diagnosed and medicated for ADHD. It's just made all the difference in the world. So I don't sympathize with that knee-jerk anti-medication attitude. Right? Sometimes medication helps. Now, medication and its benefits with regard to depression is much more dubious. But with regard to ADHD, right, the benefits happen right away. Anti-depression meds, right, they don't have a great track record. Right? There isn't much clear evidence that anti-depression meds are terribly effective. So sometimes meds are effective, sometimes they're not. With regard to ADHD, the medications are highly effective. Now, I was looking at the news, and a leading Hamas official says he would not have supported the October 7, 2023 attack on southern Israel if he had known something. Moshe. It's on that side of Pico. It's about a block down. So what was the one thing, if he had known, he would not have supported it? Was it because he experienced some empathy for Israeli suffering? No, he would not have supported the October 7 attack if he had known that Gazans would suffer so much. So the world works overwhelmingly on a collective and group basis, right? When I walk down the street, I'm not primarily seen as Luke Ford enjoying my democratic way of life, right? The sun is shining, the sky is blue, right? Supposedly I'm enjoying my democratic way of life here in the United States of America, but there's no democratic way of life. Right? Democratic way of life means you get to vote every couple of years. Other than that, almost nothing in life runs on a democratic basis. And so too, life doesn't overwhelmingly run on an individual basis because we're not willing to put in the cognitive processing power and take on that kind of cognitive load to look at people as individuals. Instead, we see them as Jews, or Haredi Jews versus modern Orthodox Jews. We see people as representative of gays, Christians, Muslims, blacks, Latinos, Mexicans, right? I walk down the street, people see a white guy wearing a yarmulke, so a Jew, who for many black and brown and yellow people, Jews are the uber white people. And so this leading Hamas official regrets the October 7 attacks because of the pain and suffering endured by his side when Israel retaliated. And so Anglo-Saxon societies, Northern European societies tend to be very individual-oriented. Protestant Christianity places the individual as its focus, individual salvation to heaven. But the world doesn't primarily operate on an individual-to-individual basis, right? People see you as a representative of a group, and they have certain expectations about different groups, otherwise known as stereotypes, and people hold stereotypes because more often than not, they are fairly accurate, because different groups have different gifts, different grifts, different predispositions, different strengths and weaknesses, and so it is much more efficient to understand people we don't know very well as representative of their particular group. And so when you want to punish terrorists, right, you want to regard the people who partook in the October 7 attack as terrorists, then you might need to do more than just punish them individually. You might need to punish the group that housed them collectively. So for Israel to respond effectively to the October 7, 2023 invasion, they have to make all of Gaza feel it. Right? It wasn't just Hamas that invaded Israel on October 7. Right? It was also a large number of Gazans who are not in Hamas. Right? They just came over to partake in the slaughter and the rape and the pillage. And if you allow a group like Hamas to run you, then you bear responsibility, and you're going to have to share the fate of Hamas. This is an iron law in history that citizens tend to share the fate of their nation state. And it's not realistic to expect anything otherwise, right? You launch an offensive war, and if you lose, right, you may be dispossessed from your land. Your governing system may change, right? No neighbor is going to be relaxed after you invade him and just be at ease with you retaining all your land and your current governing structure. Right? Israel is not going to accept Hamas in charge. And what usually happens in history is what's now called ethnic cleansing. People get moved out, right? You launch a war, you launch a surprise attack, and that will engender a furious response that will usually insist on a regime change, in this case, the removal of Hamas from power, and even removal of the Gazans, right? When Germany lost World War I, World War II, right? They lost territory, they lost power, they lost their current governing system, and about 12 million Germans who were living outside of Germany got moved back towards Germany. When you had the partition of India in 1948 and the creation of Pakistan, right, you had movement of millions of people either moving into Pakistan or moving away from what became Pakistan into India, largely on the basis of group identity, whether they were Muslim or Hindu, right? Muslims moved to Pakistan, Hindus moved to India. Both countries became stronger, more cohesive, more trusting, and more effective because they had one dominant group. Muslims have been unusually well behaved in India because reprisals against Muslims have been so intense. These reprisals haven't just been against individual Muslims. Right? When one Muslim acts badly, the entire Muslim community is is likely to suffer. That's the way the world's worked for thousands of years, because people don't have the cognitive processing power or the inclination or the incentive to treat you as an individual unless they have a particular investment in you. Otherwise, you're just a representative of a group. And so we need a more effective collective series of punishments. So O.J. Simpson, right, he was found not guilty in the criminal trial by an overwhelmingly black jury because many blacks enjoy a higher in-group identity, higher in-group loyalty, cohesion and trust than other groups in the United States. So they often refuse to vote to convict a member of their own group. And this is common with, say, first-generation immigrants, but many African Americans will continue this in-group loyalty for many, many generations, which makes a joke of the Anglo-Saxon legal system. Right, juries don't work when you have groups that simply refuse, no matter the evidence, to convict a member of their group and even celebrate his acquittal, even though all the evidence points that he was clearly a double murderer. Right. Most people operate with much higher loyalty to their group than to the truth. Many people would rather see a member of their group acquitted than convicted of heinous crimes that he clearly committed. So people are naturally tribal. Because people are naturally tribal, we need to rejigger our response to terror and our response to heinous behavior to make it more of a collective thing. So I think there should be all sorts of privileges that are only available to those who can get a tribe on their side. All right, you want a driver's license, then you should have to have 10 law-abiding adults who've never had a felony conviction vouch for you. And then if you do something heinous, once you get your license to drive, right, all those who vouch for you should have to pay the price. Right, this would be a more collective corporate punishment structure. Right, maybe even to enter a certain valuable territory, say Beverly Hills or Manhattan, you might need 20 people to vouch for you. To own a gun, right, you might need 20 law-abiding adults who never had a felony conviction to vouch for you. And then if you do something heinous with that gun, right, every person who vouched for you would have to spend a year in prison. Right, so that way you encourage people to form ties. You make life much more difficult for people who are unable to form alliances. And then you're incentivized to form alliances. And then those alliances will incentivize you to behave properly, because members of the tribe who vouch for you are not going to want to be punished for your bad behavior. So people will be incentivized to look after each other, check in on each other, to direct each other to stay on the right path. I'd imagine you could have health insurance collectives where people are incentivized to exercise regularly, to eat right, to keep their weight down, get enough sleep, right? You could have a health insurance collective at your church or synagogue, and it could then make requirements on people that they conduct themselves in a way that is in accord with the group's interests. So part of Israel's reaction to the October 7, 2023 invasion was it had to inflict pain on the entire Gazan population, not just on those who participated in the massacre, right? Because Hamas and the people who participated in the massacre, they came out of Gaza. They wouldn't have been able to operate without at least the passive support of Gazans. Ergo, if you're going to be effective at retaliating against this kind of bad behavior, you have to retaliate against the entire group. Right? They have to bear some responsibility for what happened. The only way to effectively stop terror is to retaliate against the terrorist families, loved ones, extended family, closest friends and associates. Right? If you just simply go after the terrorists and not their family, not the tribe from which they emerged, you're not going to be very effective. You're not going to stop terrorism that way. We may think individually, and there are some advantages to that, but overwhelmingly the world acts collectively. We may think democratically, but overwhelmingly the world runs on hierarchy.